Hello, I'm the nerdy chaplain, and this is Porthos, who is demanding lots of attention at the moment. This is a sermon from the archives called Rules and Hypocrisy. It comes from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 13, verses 10 through 17. It was originally preached at a Congregational Church in Connecticut on the 14th Sunday after Pentecost, 2016. Today's selection is a part of an argument that has been repeated often in all the Gospels, that the early church has used in its conflicts with the synagogues over the question of Sabbath observance. And while Jesus and his disciples observed the Sabbath, they rejected the strict legalistic interpretation. The commandment tells us to cease any creative activity or anything that exercises control over the environment on the seventh day, Saturday, as God had created for 6 days and ceased to create on the seventh. There are 39, you're stuck? The 39 activities that are specified in the Mishna. The rabbinical oral tradition, organized into 4 orders. Any part of the process of making bread, clothes, leather, and construction are forbidden. Even putting out a fire is forbidden. Since the start of the rabbinical age, around 200 AD, the exception to all these rules, what's up here? Hello, boop. The exception to all these rules is if a life is in danger. In fact, oral tradition instructs that if you are unable to tell if a life is in danger, you are to assume it is and take action just in case. I recently learned about an Israeli NGO recognized by the UN called Zaka, which is a group of volunteers that responds to any incident of unnatural death as paramedics if possible, but also, all right, you're done, but also for forensic identifications and escorts for remains. They are made up of Jews, Christians, Muslims, Bedouins, and Druze. But their core is made up of ultra-conservative, observant Jews who are exempt from military service but still want to serve their country in some way. They have responded in this country to 9/11 and Hurricane Katrina. While in Haiti, in the aftermath of the 2010 earthquake, the Zaka team, made up of the ultra-conservative Jews, on the Sabbath, they stopped for only a prayer and then got back to work in the rubble because lives were at stake. The possibility of saving a life was enough to set aside the commandment for Sabbath observant to a person who is extremely observant. Their spokesperson responded when asked, "The Torah orders us to save lives. We are desecrating the Sabbath with pride." So the rabbinical response to today's passage as permission to disregard the strict restrictions of the Sabbath is a very easy one. The woman's life was not in danger. It could have waited until the next day. So I looked for what else could be going on, rather than solely the Sabbath issue, which is a commandment level issue, is therefore assumed to be the most important issue here. Well, Jesus is also calling out hypocrites here. He is doing this because hypocrites, by definition, are not being consistent. They are following some Sabbath rules, but not others. And then try to call out Jesus for not following Sabbath rules. These owners of glass houses are throwing stones, not realizing that by judging others, They open themselves up to judgment, and then Jesus calls them out for their hypocrisy. I really dislike hypocrisy. It was one of the big points of contention I had with my managers at a bookstore I worked at that led to much friction when I pointed out the lack of consistency in how they treated me or my cashiers. When I am out performing my duties as a chaplain at gatherings, I am very consistently confronted by atheists, agnostics, former Christians, and other non-Christians because of how many who claim to be followers of Jesus Christ yet preach hate and hurt, inconsistent with Jesus' gospel of love. It is vexing that it is this type that receives the media coverage because it is more entertaining instead of the real churches doing good work for their communities. Good news doesn't sell well, apparently. In those situations, I find it hard to be a witness for Christ. All that negativity and hurt. When a certain Baptist church in Kansas, known for picketing funerals, then asks that the public respect and not protest their own funerals, or when they when they are led day to day by a woman, then release rudely worded public statements about churches with women pastors, or when they claim the mantle of Christian, yet they do not preach love. They show themselves to be hypocrites, and they drive people away from Jesus. What can anyone do? Nothing directly, really. When they came to the city where I was in divinity school, I was part of the university's graduate school senate. The undergraduate assembly came to us and asked us to help with the counter-protests. We convinced them that it would just add fuel to the fire, and that the university should just ignore them. Pretend that they are not there and do not give them an audience. What else can you do? In such situations, I remember God's words in Deuteronomy, that God will repay. There was a similar type person in Louisiana, a politician and radio show host who publicly called upon God to bring forth a flood to punish those he considered to be sinners. Well, his own house was flooded recently, and he claimed that God was just giving him a challenge to overcome. Right. Personally, I make sure that I model Christ's love for us when I'm out there as a chaplain, and when I find myself on the spot, face to face with those hurt by those hypocritical ones. I want to be an example, or a counter-example, if you will, of the hateful ones that they see on TV or on social media. I found that this is an effective tactic, and it can change perceptions. If you want to follow all the rules of the Old Testament, that is your decision, but you cannot pick and choose. That is the same hypocrisy that Jesus is calling out. Besides, Jesus says that all the law and all the prophets can be summed up as love God and love your neighbor. Following only that commandment is consistent with Jesus and the good news. Consider this. Can we ever go wrong following a commandment to love? Please join me in the spirit of prayer. O God, we are grateful for your mercy and compassion. Grant us the wisdom to recognize your good news and to avoid the hypocrisy that does not preach love, as Jesus commands us to do for you and our neighbors. Amen. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.